So this is what it looks like for you all. Back here. Okay. Time is left. I saw your email, Jalen, so I appreciate you letting me know. I did respond. Please wish DJ good luck. Tell him we're thinking of him. We're proud of him. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing there. I'm going to share over here. Oh, I don't have the slides pulled up. Hold on. $230. Okay, so I know we experienced some technical difficulties, but for the most part, I was extremely, extremely pleased with how everyone performed on the quiz yesterday. I thought everyone did very, very well on average, and there were specific people who did excellently. And so I will provide a shout out to those people once I kind of dive into the data a little bit more. But everybody has a reason to be happy. All of you all have been doing an excellent job with your attendance. Even Jalen, who's taking his brother to college right now, has still checked into class. So we've established some really strong habits as a group, and I'm excited to continue carrying on with these habits as we go. So congratulations to you all. I'm really proud of you. I'm excited for you as we continue to dive into the biology course. Today starts our second unit, day one of unit 2. It is September 3rd, 2020. And today we're going to be talking about the organelles. So unit 2 is all about cells. And we're going to talk about different types of cells. We're going to talk about how cells have adapted over the course of many, many years. We're going to talk about how we as humans are able to view cells. And we're going to break down everything that makes cells so special. So it's an exciting unit. It's one that you all probably know a little bit about already because you've had some experience talking about cells in previous science courses. And I think it's going to be one that you all perform really well on. So I'm excited about it. Today, our objective is to describe the structure and function of eukaryotic organelles. So that's a new word for many of you, I'm sure, eukaryotic. And if you took that to the prefix and suffix chart that we handed out in the first week of school, you'd see that EU, is a prefix meaning good or true. And then karyote means nut or core. So if you put those two things together, we've got a true core, which means that eukaryotic cells have something that another type of cells do not. So we're going to talk about it. They have a true core. So keep that in mind as we go. And then our essential question today that you all will hope to be answering as you take your notes and as we go along. Why is it important that each organelle has its own unique function? All right, so we'll be thinking about that and we'll try to answer it at the end of our session today. Okay. So one other thing that I want to point out to you all as I pull this unique, what is it called? Where'd it go? Utah genetics. So okay. So cells are the smallest living things. They're the smallest unit that biologists study. So at this point, you should have your notebooks out or whatever you're doing to take notes. I know we've got some people who are on the road and may not have access to strong internet or access to their notebooks right now, but everybody else, please make sure that you are writing things down. I'll try not to talk too fast. I know I have that habit. So in chemistry, we study the atom. And the atom is actually smaller than the cell. And we're going to I'll give you all a really cool interactive opportunity so you can see the relative sizes. But in biology, the smallest things that we study are cells because they are the smallest living things. The purpose of a cell and the purpose that it tries to fulfill throughout its lifetime is the creation of proteins. And so sometimes you may hear us refer to cells as protein factories. And proteins, that's a word that you're familiar with at this point. That's a word that we've talked a lot about over the last week and a half. And so it's a word that you should already have some ideas about in terms of what we use to build proteins and potentially where we even get the instructions from to build proteins. Maybe you have some ideas about that already. Kiki is the only person who I can see, so when I see her stop writing, that's when I'll move on. All right. Before we get to this slide, I'm actually going to share this with you all. So this is going to help you really think about how small cells are. Okay, so what we have here, if you were to type out an essay and you typed it in Times New Roman and your font size was 12, then it would be about this size that you're seeing here. Or if you're a coffee drinker, maybe you're familiar with the size of a coffee bean, or maybe you're familiar with the size of a grain of rice. But basically, these are all very small, right? In general, these things are pretty small. But we can go even smaller than that. Maybe we're thinking about a grain of salt, which is 0.5 millimeters in diameter. So it's small, it's very small. A millimeter is 1,000th of a meter. So I would need 1,000 millimeters to make 1 meter. So this is very, very small. And here's my meter stick right here. So if I could somehow cut this into 1,000 pieces, then that would be the size of a grain of rice. I'm sorry, a grain of salt. Hope there's not a mouse in my classroom. Then we see an amoeba right here, which is something that we'll talk about later in the course. But now we are finally getting down into the size of cells. Here's a human egg cell, and it's 130 micrometers. That's what this symbol is. That's the lowercase letter mu. It's a Greek letter, mu, and it stands for micro. So 130 micrometers, that is extremely, extremely small. Okay, so I'll zoom back out to give you an idea. If you see in the top left corner, you see how we're just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. There's your human egg cell. Of course, females have eggs, males have sperm. So you can see here, a sperm is much, much smaller than a human egg. Go figure. Here's a skin cell, a red blood cell. This is a photoreceptor rod, which is what are in the back of our eyes that allow us to process light. Red blood cells, of course, deliver oxygen. They carry oxygen to the rest of our bodies, or rest of our body. Here's an X chromosome. So everybody has an X chromosome. Women have 2 of them. Men have 1, and they also have a Y chromosome, people who are born male, I should say. Okay. Here's E. coli. So it is 0.1 or 1.8 micrometers. That's E. coli, extremely, extremely small. We're getting smaller still. These things, lysosome and mitochondrion, you actually can find them inside of all these cells. All these other cells have them. Red blood cells have them, skin cells, egg cells, they have those 2 things. There's your measles virus. It looks a lot like the novel coronavirus. It's got that protein covering on the outside. There's your influenza virus. Again, protein covering, looks like spikes. There's the human immunodeficiency virus, commonly known as HIV. This is the virus that causes AIDS. So extremely, extremely small here. Hepatitis virus, rhinovirus. Here's a ribosome. We're going to talk a lot about ribosomes. We'll start with it with the discussion today, but they're extremely small. They're responsible for the production of proteins. Here's hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the specific compound inside of your red blood cells, the protein inside of your red blood cells that carries oxygen. This is an antibody. So you've probably heard a lot about antibodies over the last few weeks as we try to produce these antibodies to give people immunity to the coronavirus, or at least so that their sickness is not, if they do get the coronavirus, then their sickness will not be so severe. Here's a phospholipid. We've talked about that before. Now we're no longer in the size of micrometers. We're talking about nanometers now. Okay, so these are, I would need to cut this meter stick into 1 billion small pieces in order to be the size of 1 nanometer. All right, so this is extremely small. Obviously, we are far past the point at which you could see these things with the naked eye.
That means you would have to use a microscope, or
So,
not microscope.
With some of these,
something.
We could, at this level, yes, we have microscopes that are strong enough to see a mitochondrion, for example. So something that's about a micrometer, we do have microscopes that are strong to see those things. But when we're starting to talk about things that are nanometers in size, they're far too small, even for our strongest microscopes to see. We can use what are called electron microscopes, which we will talk about next Wednesday. That'll give us a picture, but it's not like you can just, they're not the microscopes that you can look in with your eyes. They're much stronger and they're much, much bigger than that. Okay, and then a carbon atom. So a carbon atom is essentially what we find in everything. Carbon is the organic element. It is what essentially gives us life. And so this is one of the smallest known elements. It's actually number 6 on the periodic table. So it's very, very small. All right, so we can see that most of the things that, you know, you could see with your naked eye, a grain of salt, they're much, much bigger than the things that we talk about in biology. At this point, you'd need to use a microscope to view these things. Okay. Okay, so back to the notes. So all living things are made of cells. That is the foundational concept of cell theory. And we also don't want to forget the concept of structure determining function. So as the size and shape of a cell changes, the job that that cell has also changes, and its abilities also change. Thank you, Gabby. I appreciate you having your camera on. I like the art on your wall as well. Okay, and then we also know that new cells can only be generated from existing cells. So life comes from life. So my question for you all, I'm going to push you all, and we'll answer this question at some point in the semester, but I'm going to push you now. If life only comes from life, then where did the first life come from?
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah. So what we're seeing on our slide right here, let me use this. Point number 3 says, new cells come from existing cells. Life comes from life. So if life can only come from other living things, then where did the first living thing come from?
You want us to answer right now?
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, there can't be life without water, right?
That's true.
And water came from outer space, right?
There are different theories on that, but that's one of the theories, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming it came from outer space with water.
Okay. So Adrian just spoke about one of the theories that all the water that we have on our planet was at one point frozen meteorites. And as those meteorites collided with our Earth, which at one point was literally just like a ball of fire, or a ball of like molten lava. As those meteorites collided with our Earth, the frozen ice melted, and it covered our planet in water. Okay, so that is one of the theories, and it's probably the correct theory based on the evidence that we have. But even then, that just is the source of water. So where was the life before that?
It forms on Earth after water. Well, I guess it, because there can't be life without water. And since water was introduced, I'm assuming it just formed out of time, and more time, it just formed.
Good, good. And you are correct with that. So we're going to talk about that more specifically much later in the semester. But essentially, it was water and time. There were some other things that contributed to it as well, like energy that came from both heat as well as electrical energy that came from lightning. Um, and then there were also other chemicals involved, but we'll talk more about that later. So, but you're right. Essentially, it was because we had water on our planet, and it was because millions and millions of years had elapsed, and there were many trials and error. And so all it took was really just one successful trial, and from there sprouted life. And of course, over millions and millions of years, we get all these different forms of life. So you're correct, Adrian. All right. So I think we've seen this hierarchy before, but we'll just reiterate. If we think about a cell as being a living organism, just like a human body is a living organism, then cells have organelles just like a human body has organs. Okay, so your brain in your body has a specific function. Your heart in your body has a specific function. Your muscles in your body have a specific function. So within the cell, there are these organelles, each of which has very specific functions. And they do these things well, and they don't really tend to blend functions. Specific organelles only do specific things. And this is efficient. This is what allows us to do things quickly. Okay. So you've seen this before. This is really the important. This is what I want you to take away from this slide. So what does it look like inside of a cell? This should be an interesting activity for you all. Yeah, there's no need for the audio. But what we're seeing here essentially is it looks like a whole bunch of nothing, but in a poetic way, it looks like being underwater in the ocean. And you're seeing these different proteins interact with one another. You're seeing the structure of the cell, what gives the cell its actual structure. You're seeing the production of a protein in this case. That was an enzyme breaking down another protein. You're seeing things leave this cell, potentially to go to other cells. So cells communicate with each other, and they use hormones to do it. Hormones are a specific class of proteins, as you all know. That is what's called the Golgi apparatus. It's like the processing plant of the cell. Yeah, so it looks like another world, honestly, but it's important to remember that your bodies have trillions of cells inside of them. So those processes are happening in you constantly, and they're happening inside of you many billions of times every day. All right, so here's a picture of a eukaryotic cell. So do you all remember any of the organelles from middle school? Can you tell me any of the organelles?
No, sorry.
Nucleus.
That's okay. Okay, which one is the nucleus?
The blue thing in the middle.
Okay, good.
The membrane.
Okay, yep, we've got the cell membrane. I'm not sure which. Okay, I'm gonna use this one.
The mitochondria.
Good. Do you know which one is the mitochondria?
The yellow ones.
Yeah, good. Anything else?
I remember one that starts with an R. I just forgot what it's called.
Okay.
Is it ribosomes?
Yeah, yeah. Yes, we've got ribosomes. Let's see.
Cytoplasm.
Good. Okay. Ribosomes. I'm gonna type cytoplasm. I don't know which specific arrow is pointing to it, but I think it's this one. Ribosomes. Chloroplast. Now, this specific cell does not have chloroplast, but that's good, Jalen. This is an animal cell, so we don't have any chloroplast here, but plant cells do have chloroplast.
Plasma membrane.
Good. So the cell membrane can also be called the plasma membrane. Okay, this is a good list. Five things. So we're going to talk about even more today. Let's see. Uh-oh. All right, I'm gonna add something here. All right. So cell wall. The cell wall is only in plant cells. Now keep in mind, all the cells that we're talking about today are eukaryotic. We'll talk about prokaryotic cells tomorrow, and we'll highlight some differences between them. The cell wall is the outermost layer of an animal cell, and it provides protection because it's very rigid. And it also gives plants their shape. So like I said, most animals and insects have bones. We have specific cells that create bones for us. Plants don't have those cells. They don't have osteocytes, which are bone cells. So their structure comes from two things: water pressure and the cell wall.
What's in the inside of the cell wall? You see like where that blue is
In which image?
in the
Left or
first
right?
one? Left.
This thing right here?
Mm-hmm.
That's called a vacuole, and we'll talk about that in a couple slides. Okay, but cell walls are made of cellulose. Does anybody know which of our four biological molecules is cellulose?
Carbohydrates.
Excellent. And how did you know that?
It has the lose at the end.
Good. So this OSE ending told Alicia that this is a sugar. So that means it's a carbohydrate. Okay. Looks like folks are done writing. Then we have the cell membrane, or as Castro said, the plasma membrane. We should also recognize this word, phospholipid. All cells have a cell membrane because the cell membrane is basically what separates the inside of the cell from the outside. So they all have this. The cell membrane controls what can come in and what goes out of the cell. So there are specific gates within the cell membrane that allow certain things in. There's a specific gate for water. There's a specific gate for certain types of hormones. There are specific gates for different ions like potassium and calcium and sodium and zinc. So within this plasma membrane are all these different channels that allow some things in and some things out. Okay. Skipping that. All right. So as Alicia told us, or someone, I can't remember exactly who it was, the nucleus is that big thing that's in the center of the cell. So at the beginning of the lesson, I said that eukaryotes mean true core, the true core is the nucleus. And it's the control center of the cell. And within the nucleus is where you'll find all of the DNA, where you'll find the chromosomes. So we talked about it a little bit last week, but humans have 46 chromosomes. You get 23 from your father, 23 from your mother. So all in all, you have 46. And these chromosomes, they range in size because they have different amounts of DNA, but they control all of they make you who you are.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Are we all like kind of related? Like not directly, but like indirectly, because we're all humans.
Yes, and if you go back far enough, and well, really, you don't have to go, depending on where you are in the world, you really don't have to go back that far. But if you go back far enough, you will find that many of us do have the same ancestors, especially if we're coming from similar cultures or similar places around the world. There's a man who maybe you all have heard of in some of your previous classes, some of your history classes, named Genghis Khan.
Oh yes, I've heard of him.
Genghis Khan, we have shown that he is essentially the grandfather, or he is the paternal ancestor of like 5% of the human population, like a huge percentage of the human population, because he had hundreds of children. He was this emperor of the Mongolian Empire, and his role as emperor, he had many children. And because of that, his DNA was spread far and wide throughout the human population. But I'll show you all this really quickly. This is called a karyotype. And what you can see here is that these are the human chromosomes. So we got 23 pairs. So on the first pair, we've got 1-2 chromosomes. On the second pair, we've got 1-2 chromosomes. And the first pair is the longest. As you can see, as I go down, as I get to 22, the chromosomes are quite short. The first pair has about 230 billion bases, so different letters, the A's, the T's, the C's, the G's. So it's very long. And then down here, I can see my X and Y chromosomes. So this is a karyotype from a male, because there's an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. If it were a person born female, then I would have 2 X's. Okay, back to the slides. Okay, which organic compound is DNA an example of?
Nucleic acid.
Yes. Good. And we know its function. All right. Okay.
I
So,
thought
Rob,
I thought that was like blood and something. I was so confused. I was trying to figure out why was blood. I thought it was like some type of something, inside the human body, and I was trying to figure out why was it on a grill.
No, I believe those are pork ribs. Yes, but that's just a good analogy. Like I said, part of becoming a good student is learning how to finesse. Part of finessing is coming up with good analogies, and it doesn't have to make sense to anybody but you. So this is just one example. Ribs have protein on them. Ribosomes are responsible for making protein. They're responsible for synthesizing proteins. They are extremely small, but they have an extremely important role.
What is that picture on the far left?
That is an electron microscope image of ribosomes.
Huh?
An electron microscope, essentially, I'll pull up a picture. An electron microscope is a very large machine that shoots electrons at something. And as the electrons, some of them collide with things like a ribosome, they bounce back in a specific way that gives you an image. So let's see. You can see how large this thing is.
Oh, wow.
It's not like the microscopes that I have in the back of my classroom that you just put your eyes into and you can see, but they give you these really detailed images.
Oh, that's cool.
Here's an image, I'm sure, of red blood cells under an electron microscope. Yep. Here, that's a white blood cell. Those are platelets. White blood cells are responsible for your body's immune system. So electron microscopes give you these really detailed images, but they're very expensive, they're difficult to operate, and they're big.
Thanks for showing me that, because I had no idea what you were talking about.
You're welcome. All right, so the classic saying is that mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell because they produce the energy for the cell. Please make sure that you write down ATP. Energy, when we're talking about cells, comes in the form of ATP. We're going to talk a lot more about that in the 4th unit of the class.
I have a question. Since I'm writing the notes down, are we supposed to put these in a Google Doc and put them in our folder as well?
You don't need to. If that would help you remain organized, I think that would be a great idea.
And this is a unit 2, right?
Yes, ma'am. So mitochondria are extremely important, and mitochondria appear in all cells. All cells need mitochondria because they need energy to do whatever it is they're responsible for doing. And the interesting thing about mitochondria is that they're more effective if they have greater surface area. So in order to maximize their surface area, they create folds. They have internal folds called cristae. And the more folds they have, the more energy efficient they are, the more energy they are able to produce.
Is it me, or is this today's going by really fast?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That's a bad thing.
Okay. Does anyone need more time? Kiki, are you good? Oh, Gabby, are you
I
good?
got everything.
Good. Okay. All right. Jalen mentioned chloroplasts. I'm going to make this a slight change too. Chloroplasts are only in plant cells. Chloroplasts are responsible for making the food for a plant. They make the glucose for the plant. Of course, animals don't need to do that because we eat. We get our energy, we get our sugar from external sources. And within the chloroplast is something called chlorophyll, which captures sunlight, which is needed to make the glucose via photosynthesis. So chlorophyll is green, which is why most plants appear green in color, because they have a lot of chlorophyll in their cells.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Do Venus flytraps have like different types of cells since they eat flies?
Good. Yeah. So they are still a plant, so they do have plant cells, but they have specific enzymes that allow them to break down dead insects and use the decomposed chemicals from the insects' bodies for energy production, respiration. So they're capable of doing both photosynthesis and regular respiration. And Venus flytraps are actually native to the state of North Carolina. So in certain parts of the eastern part of our state, you can actually find Venus flytraps that grow naturally.
I've saw one before. My
Really?
brother, he wanted to try to feed it a hot dog, and he had to like scream at him.
Yeah, they're not too keen on hot dogs, but bees, flies, and the like, yeah, they'll do those. Moths, dragonflies. Okay. So, Ayana, you asked me what was that big blue thing when we were looking at the plant wall? That was the vacuole. And the vacuole is responsible for storing extra material for the cell. So that extra material might be nutrients, it might be water, could be waste. But in plant cells, the vacuole is much larger than it is in an animal cell. And you can kind of see that in this illustration on the right side. The plant cell and the animal cell, the vacuole in the animal cell is small, but it's much, much bigger in a plant cell. Why do you think that is? Why do plant cells need a bigger vacuole?
Because it stores materials there. So in order like to have materials, you need a lot of space to put it.
Okay, and that's right. So what specific material do plants need to store a lot of?
Energy.
Um, carbon dioxide.
Don't think too hard. If you have a plant in your house, what do you constantly need to do to it?
Water.
Water.
You have to water it. Yeah. So plants need to be able to store a lot of water just in case. It's kind of funny, just in case of a rainy day, pun intended. But just in case it's literally not a rainy day and they're not getting any water, they need to still have that reserve. They need to have that backup. And this is why you'll start to see what happens to plants if they haven't been watered in a while.
They start drying.
Yeah.
You get those spots on it. I have a plant. It's an aloe vera plant.
Yeah, they start to dry up, and if you watch them over the course of several days, to droop a little bit, and that's because they're using their water to survive. They're not using the water to stand up anymore. So a well-watered plant will be erect; it'll stand up. But when the water is no longer available to it, it'll start to droop, and that's how you know it needs more water.
A plant can also drown too.
That's true. Plants can, you can give plants too much water, can overwater them.
We had some plants we were growing, and they got left out in outside. It was raining. It was during the time when there was a storm, so they pretty much got drowned.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll talk about exactly why that is. I don't remember exactly when in the course, but we do talk about why that is. And it's essentially all cells have a certain limit to the amount of water that is healthy for them. And after you pass that limit, the cell actually bursts. And so that can happen to plants as well. There's only so much water storage that they can do.
I still have my aloe vera plant.
Okay. Okay, we're almost done. So cytoplasm is considered an organelle, but it really is just the medium in which everything else is swimming. It's like the pool, and it's mostly water, but it has some other things in it, like some sugars. So the sugars give it a little bit of and the fats give it a little bit of a jelly-like substance.
I have a question.
Yes.
So all these pictures, they're actually like they're small, right? Like in real life, you would need a microscope to see them. Or
You need a very, very strong microscope, yes.
so if we were in biology class, like in class, will we be able to see stuff through a microscope?
Yes, you can see some of them. I do have some specific slides of different plant cells and some muscle cells that you can see under a microscope.
Sorry, I asked so many questions.
That's good. I like it. True scientists ask a lot of questions. So we're going to do a simulation on Friday. I'm sorry, on next Thursday, in which you all will be able to see different things under microscopes. But the ability, this is actually an entire field of science within itself, because being able to read a microscope is not an easy thing to do, because the structures that we're talking about are not easy to identify in a microscope. You have to be pretty seasoned at doing it. Okay. So the good thing about the cytoplasm is that it's rigid enough to allow organelles to stay in place. So just because I shake my arm doesn't mean that all the organelles and all of the cells are just moving around rapidly and randomly. But they're also fluid enough to allow them to move when they have to. So certain parts of the cell need to be able to move from the nucleus all the way to the plasma membrane. And in order to do that, they need to rely on a medium that allows them to get there. Okay, so certain things can move certain times, just so they can communicate with one another. Okay, practice question, and then that'll be it for the day. Which organelle is commonly referred to as the control center, and why?
The nucleus, because it contains our DNA.
Excellent, yeah. So C, the nucleus. The nucleus is the control center because it tells everybody else what to do. It says you should be making this, you should be making that. Here are the instructions to do that. So the nucleus is the control center. It's the boss of the cell. Okay. So some of you I know were not able to do the quiz yesterday. So in the remaining time, well, actually, I thought we would have a lot more time than we did, but we had a lot to cover today. So don't worry about the quiz right now if you weren't able to take it, because I don't want you to start it and then you don't have enough time to finish it. But take a look at, I would start with number 3. That's probably going to be your shortest. You should be able to get that done in the next 10 minutes. And then the other 2 assignments we'll put on hold for now. You will still need to do them before the end of the unit, which will be next Friday. But we have a 3-day weekend. And
3-day weekend? When?
This weekend. We don't have school on Monday.
What's Monday? A holiday?
Yes, Monday is Labor Day.
Oh.
So that being said, you will have time to get this done, but I'd focus on number 3, on activity number 3, the Amoeba Sisters right now. And then the other 2 you can come back to if you don't have time.
I have a question. I don't mean to sound stupid or anything, but do we also have cells in our hair?
No, hair is not living. So that was a good question. Hair is a specific protein that gets pushed out by living cells, but it itself is not living. So you don't have any cells in your hair.
So basically we just have non-living stuff on top of our head.
Correct.
Never thought of it as that way. I thought it was just, I don't know.
So let's see if I can pull this image up. It's kind of small. Hold on. Okay, so this is a little small. But we've got these layers of skin. The top layer is called the epidermis. Just under that, you've got the dermis.
I can't hear you. You're breaking up.
Sorry. We've got these layers of skin. The top layer is called the epidermis. Then just under that, you've got the dermis. And the dermis is where your nerve cells are located. It's how blood is delivered to the rest of your skin. So it's an important layer. And then under that, you've got a layer of fat. So this would be pretty, if you've ever heard somebody say they got cut open to the white meat, that white meat is actually fat. And that does mean that it was probably a pretty deep cut, but it's the white meat is actually fat. And then within the dermis, you also have hair follicles, which are a specific type of cell that produce the protein keratin. And keratin is what makes your hair, but the hair itself is not living. The follicles just continue to produce keratin. And so kind of like a chia pet or like Play-Doh. Like if you squeeze Play-Doh, it's gonna try to come out of the holes. That's what happens with skin. As we produce more keratin, it just gets pushed up and out of the skin. Now, as you get older, or if you have specific conditions, your hair follicles are inactive or they become less active. And some of them even die. So you start to lose some hair or your hair starts to thin. But that was a good question.
Thanks for explaining that.
You are welcome.
So, which one was the Amoeba Sisters video?
Oh, it should be in Canvas. Let me. Yep, it's.
Oh, okay. Are you in modules or assignments?
I am in modules.
Which day is it? Because I don't see that one. I see another one, but I don't see that one.
Can you share your screen?
Am I sharing my screen? I can't tell.
Yes, it's coming up now.
Am I sharing the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so here it is. I'm in modules, and I saw that one, and I saw another one that said macromolecules, but I didn't see the one you were talking about.
Okay, go back up to day 1.
Yeah. Wait, day 1, unit 1?
Unit 2. So what I would do, and this is, I'm glad this is happening actually. So actually, I want to go scroll all the way back up to the top.
Mm-hmm.
And do you see that little arrow just to the left of unit 0?
Oh,
Click
yeah.
that so you can collapse it and do the same thing for unit.
Along with the first telescope. Claims are often disputed, as apparently he wasn't the only bored guy with.
You said unit 2 what?
Now scroll down just a little bit.
Is this it right here?
There. Yep, that's it.
Okay. Sorry for all the trouble. I just didn't see it before.
No problem. Okay, folks, it is 11:35. I want you all to have some time for lunch, to decompress, watch whatever shows you watch, listen to your music, go outside. Have a good day. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Bye.
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 You'll be
See ya.
taking the test tomorrow.
See ya.
What was that, Ayana?
Bye.
You're taking the test tomorrow.
Yeah, because you weren't able to take yours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll try again tomorrow, and I'll have a backup plan ready if it doesn't work.
Okay. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too.